So if we could switch to the PowerPoint, we're going to talk about natural light for a second. And the easiest way to deal with natural light is window treatments, right? What are the characteristics of window treatments that you need to look out for? Well, the big main categories are solar, privacy, room darkening and blackout, and decorative. And if I break those down, we talk about solar shades first because those are the shades that we see in the majority of the residents, right? So there's opacity to it. You can see through it. It does let some light in. Most residential spaces in terms of opacity are 1 to 5%, meaning the tightest opacity, 1%, lets 1% of light through it. Opacity is one of the main questions someone has to address. The second question is color. So what does color actually mean? Besides personal preference, and I just like a lighter colored shade or I like a darker colored shade, it actually does something for the space. And a lighter colored shade is going to reflect light and provide more privacy, right? Where a darker colored shade is going to absorb that light and give you a better view. So a lot of times in urban areas, we're using lighter colored shades because people need that privacy element. And a lot of times in more urban areas, we're using a darker colored shade because you want to preserve that view and still maintain some protection of the finishes in your house. Privacy shade. So a privacy shade is described as less than 1%. So this is letting less than 1% of light through. It's strictly designed for privacy. It's nice because it does still glow, right? So it's not like a room darkening or a blackout shade. We see this a lot on the first floor in urban areas. We see this a lot in bathrooms. It's a pretty good tool to not make the room feel like you're kind of shutting out the world, but you're still getting a lot of privacy. And then we have room darkening. So I'm very careful when I describe a room darkening shade. A lot of people, when you say blackout shade, this is what they're talking about. However, this shade is not, although the fabric is not letting light in, when the shade is shut, you still get light channels on the side, right? So if someone says blackout, it's like, what do they really mean? Do they want just a shade that doesn't let any light through, or do they just want, something like this? So we describe this, completely opaque fabric as room darkening. Full blackout lives in side channels, right? So that's a conversation that also has to happen early on in the design process because these side channels a lot of times are architectural, right? They can be surface mounted, but most people prefer that they're recessed into a jamb so they don't have to look at them. But that is going to completely block out any light at all from coming into a room. And we see this a lot in primary bedrooms. We see this a lot in media rooms, spaces like that. And then we get to decorative. So when I talk about decorative shades, it's less about managing natural light and more about raising the level of decor in a space. A lot of times these are designer fabrics. A lot of times they're hand woven. They come at a high price point, right? Most of the time they're natural materials, so they tend to break down a little bit faster than a traditional kind of more utilitarian solar or sheer shade. But it's a high-end item, and a lot of people are really looking for that level of finish in certain spaces of their house. You can have motorized Roman shades, as we just saw. You can do roller shades, drapery tracks, all things like that. So it's really important to kind of hash out what those items are because they all do have spatial requirements and power requirements and things like that. And that kind of leads me to tying this stuff all together. So, we've talked a lot about lighting, we've talked a little bit about shading, but this kind of process goes for all of the technology subsystems in a home. And, this is a process that we've broken out because it's in line with, the rest of the build process. And it really starts with a client interview and an education, just like, what have you lived with before, that type of deal. What are you looking to accomplish? What are your expectations? Things like that. We go into program development, which is essentially scope and budget development. Design development, which is a little bit more detail, and then construction drawings. So, we use a proprietary software for scope and budget development, but it's, at this level in the process, It's really just trying to figure out, what goes where and what's the budget, right? So these is just a schematic sketch, typically a PDF, with simple icons just outlining different components in a system, right? And a lot of times this is including shades, access control, audio, video, lighting control. It's important to have a really easy way to kind of manipulate that scope and custom tune it to that person's budget. And the next step up from that is a design development package. And this is, a level up of detail, right? You get shade schedules, you get lighting schedules, you get power and signal requirements, and this is all stuff that you guys should look for at this stage in the process, right? You get corresponding CAD level drawings, nothing's dimensioned. Technically, you could kind of build from this, right? Because you know what wires go where, what signal requirements things have, stuff like that. And then the next level up is finished level construction drawings, right? You should have section details and elevations and fully dimensioned plans for where all the lights go, where all the recessed lights go, everything like that. And that takes you, head-end equipment is really important. A lot of electricians have certainly worked with, the majority of the lighting control systems out there, right? But that head-end is really important space. What are the BTU calculations, right? What else is going in there? Working with the MEP guys to figure out if all of this stuff will be functional in the space. So these are really important drawings for the process. Just some use cases. We see some surface-mounted shades up there, which is a new product that's hitting the market. An example of a lighting control keypad. It's a nice house in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Buzzwords to look out for. So lighting, lumen output. How much light is the fixture actually producing? Color temperature. What does the client prefer? Color rendering index. Are the suggested fixtures, do they actually render color to make it look as realistic as possible? Dim to warm. Is there some sort of tunability with that fixture? What is that? That's a really important one to pay attention to. That's when someone says tunable lighting, it's like, let's look at the spec sheet and see the wiring requirements for this fixture, right? And what does that mean for the rest of the infrastructure for the house? And that goes for tunable light too. Those last two are really important buzzwords to pay attention to. And then shading. So what do we have here? Solar and shear, privacy, room darkening, all just kind of the main different types of shades. Side channels. Shade pockets is a huge one. Where do the rollers and motors for these shades live? Are they surface mounted? Are they recessed into the ceiling? Is this component provided by the shade manufacturer? Is this something that you guys have to coordinate and build? So we have pocket conversations all the time. Every day, and it's those section details really come in handy when figuring out how these things actually live in a building. And that's what we have.
Can we go back to the showroom? You know what I'm going to ask you.
Oh, you want to see? Yes.
So there's a feature of the tunable lighting that we'll try to show you here, and it's really valuable for clients that have art that they want to feature or other features in the house that they want to highlight. And you will see, if you pay attention, you will see it here. And I don't want to put you on the spot, but let's see if we can get that to come across. Explain what it does.
So this is basically, I describe it as an Instagram filter for your house. And essentially what this fixture can do is you can manipulate the wavelength of light that it emits to exaggerate certain colors and tones. So if you look at the oranges, if you could turn it off, Kate, and then turn it back on, you're going to see that orange gets exaggerated. And you can also see that the color of the bowl does not change, right? So it's not a filter or a lens that's going over the fixture. It's actually like a manipulation of the recipe that creates the light.
So what are you injecting? You're injecting different colors into the white to make the orange pop out?
Yeah.
Do it a couple other times. I'd make sure to see if we can see the nuance. When you're standing in front of it, can you guys make out the change in the orange?
So an example of why we use this in the real world is art, right? A lot of our clients all have really intensive art collections. And with this fixture, we can pull out certain tones in the architecture or the artwork to, their specifications. Like say they want this picture to be a little bit more blue, we can make it a little bit more blue. Things like that. Another cool use case is we can match the conditions that the artwork was worked on. So like say someone has an oil painting and it was painted by candlelight, right? We can replicate that candlelight and preserve that artist's perspective. And when you have a really significant art collection, lighting it is a really big deal. And this ability to kind of fine tune that is huge and a big selling point for a lot of people.
And so talk a little bit about how this system is wired, the sort of daisy chain Romex for one, and just so
Sure.
they understand that part of it.
Yeah, no, that's an important characteristic. So basically the way this particular fixture works is that it's all daisy chained together and it has a direct feed to the circuit breaker. So there's no dimmer or switch in between this fixture and the power source. And you can actually put up to like 50 of these on one 20 amp circuit, which is pretty wild. I mean, it's the same circuit that you use to charge your phone is the same thing that can light almost 50 fixtures in your home. And that's due to the low energy usage of the LEDs. But it's, one, it's cool because it saves in wiring labor. Two, it's nice because it's just, you don't have to worry about control devices in between the fixture and making sure that it's an ELV dimmer or an MOV dimmer or anything like that. But it's really important because it works so tightly with the lighting control system. And it's really important to kind of hash out and have a Rolodex of control systems that work with the fixtures that you like to use. The industry hasn't really standardized on dimming protocols with fixtures. So say, for example, you have 4 recessed lights and they work on a dimmer. And then you have another circuit in a house that only has one of those recessed lights and you use the same dimmer, it might not work, right? So there's no real resource to go check that out and say, does this light work with this fixture? Or does this light work with this dimmer? You can call the company that makes a dimmer and they're gonna go, well, why don't you call the lighting company? And then they're gonna say, well, why don't you call the dimmer company? So it's really important to have real world use cases of this stuff working together. And that's something that at this point in time really just comes with experience.
So talk about the controllability of the lamps and how it relates to like saturation of the artwork. So you've got 2 different pieces of art on the wall. One has a blue, sort of essence, and the other is orange. Mm-hmm. And then you want to create the temperature, the color of the light in the space itself, right? So how do you manage? You got 6, 8 fixtures up there. You want to have 3 different things happen. You want to have either a variable color of light in the room, plus you want to saturate those paintings. And how do you control that?
So I think there's a couple of different aspects to that. One is the fixture that you use to do it. Is it a wall washer? Is it designed specifically for artwork? Is it an adjustable fixture? So it could be a downlight, or you could point it at the wall if you want it to. So a lot of it, with the majority of the lighting market, depends on how the fixtures are circuited together, right? And it's something that you want to think about beforehand. And then, when I'm walking through a space with a client, it's always, let's light the walls. From a lighting design perspective, what we see a lot in bedrooms, for example, is what I call 4 cans and a fan, right? So it's 4 downlights and a fan with a light kit in the middle. And that lights the room sufficiently to do what you need to do in it, But if you simply just point those recessed lights at the wall instead of the floor, that room is going to feel a lot more full of light, and it's going to be a lot more comfortable to be in. You're going to have less glare from the recessed light fixtures, and it just makes the room feel more comfortable. So, when you're walking through a space or thinking about a lighting design, and you look at it on plan, and you're going to see, 99% of the time, it's just a really symmetrical grid on the ceiling, right? But what you really want to do is you want to fine-tune that to the space, and you really want to light the walls more so than the floor in a lot of instances. And when we're talking about things like artwork, it's like, where is that artwork going? And let's, maybe circuit these fixtures separately so you can kind of have that adjustability in the space. In terms of color temperature, besides having that specific like art gallery scenario where you're fine-tuning it to the artwork, a lot of it is about consistency, right? So one is the goal is to have the same color temperature as the sun. That's going to make the space feel the most comfortable. And two is, is your under cabinet lighting the same color temperature as your recess lighting? Is your recess lighting a different color temperature than your decorative lighting? So it's all about trying to match that stuff up as much as possible.
Yeah.
To kind of create that cohesive environment. And another thing to that point too is it's important to find a manufacturer that has different levels of fixture, so like that good, better, best, because a lot of times what happens is when you have, we talk about front of the house, back of the house, right? Like you might not have the same grade fixture in the kitchen that you do in a secondary bedroom, right? You don't necessarily have to use the same recessed light throughout the whole house. And when you step down in that price point for those secondary spaces and you use a different manufacturer, a lot of times those color temperatures aren't going to match with the rest of the house, right? Even though they both say 2700 Kelvin, there's no like authority that's going around and making sure that they're both the same 2700 Kelvin.
So you don't have to put the $800 fixtures throughout the whole house. You can do those in the key areas.
Right.
And put less expensive fixtures, hallways, bedrooms, things like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.